Well, welcome to another edition of Traveling Through History. Really glad you're here this week. This week, we're going to be looking at a very interesting group that's been around for hundreds of years called the Freemasons. And it started back in ancient England in the 1500s, really came to prominence around 1721. And we'll go into all the history of the Freemasons and how they came to prominence and how many of the English and American most prominent figures in our history actually were Freemasons. What Freemasons believe, how you get admitted to the Brotherhood, their influence throughout history and the things that they've done, and how a lot of their secret symbols have caused a lot of conspiracy theories over the years as to what Freemasons believe, and if any of their beliefs are good, bad, or maybe even have nefarious reasons behind them. So we're going to look into all of those kinds of things. It's a really fascinating group. The one thing that's interesting about the Freemason fraternity, of course, they started as stonemasons back in the ancient times. Their main focus in those times were they were building very large cathedrals and castles, and they were doing tremendous efforts in carving stone. And they took tremendous pride in the way that they would do the carving of those stones. And their craftsmanship was just unbelievable. And to enter the stonemasons at that time, you had to obviously be a fantastic craftsman. But in addition to that, you needed to be a Christian, you needed to be a male, and you needed to be someone who was upstanding in society. You needed to be seen as an upstanding citizen. So there were definitely some requirements to be admitted to the fraternity itself. And of course, that carried through all the way through into British aristocracy and into American prominent politicians like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and others. And we'll talk about some of those requirements and also some of the prominent things that Freemasons did over the generations. So let's go ahead and get into Freemasons and the Masonic movement. So Freemasonry was the teachings and practices of the fraternal men only at the time order of free and accepted Masons, the largest worldwide secret society, an oath-bound society often devoted to fellowship, moral discipline, mutual assistance, and conceals some of its rituals and customs or activities from the public. Secret societies do not always necessarily conceal their membership or existence. What's very interesting about Freemasonry compared to other secret societies is that they are very open about being members of the Freemasons. So everyone knows who they are and whether they're in the Freemason group or in the Masonic movement. But what they don't know is their secret rituals, customs, and other activities that they do that they hide from the public. That they don't know, but they know their membership. You know, unlike the Illuminati and some of the other fraternities that are very famous over the years where you don't even know who the members are. So that's an interesting thing about Freemasonry. It's very much out in the open. It remains most popular in the British Isles and in other countries originally within the empire, like the United States, like Australia, etc. Estimates of worldwide membership of Freemasonry in the early 21st century ranged around 2 million to 6 million people over those multiple countries I talked about. Freemasonry evolved from the guilds of stonemasons and cathedral builders of the Middle Ages. With the decline of cathedral building, some lodges of operative working masons began to accept honorary members to bolster their declining membership. From a few of these lodges developed a modern symbolic or speculative Freemasonry, which particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries adopted the rites and trappings of ancient religious orders and of chivalric brotherhoods. In 1717, the first Grand Lodge, an association of lodges, was founded in England. Freemasonry has, almost from its inception, encountered considerable opposition from organized religion, especially from Roman Catholic Church and from other states. Freemasonry is not a Christian institution, although we did talk about earlier, being a Christian was one of the entry requirements. It has often been mistaken as a Christian institution for that reason. Freemasonry contains many of the elements of religion. Its teachings enjoin morality, charity, and obedience to law of the land. In most traditions, the applicant for admission is required to be an adult male, and all applicants must also believe in the existence of a supreme being or God, and in the immortality of the soul. In practice, some lodges have been charged with prejudice against Jews, Catholics, and non-whites. Generally, Freemasonry in Latin countries has attracted those who question religious dogma or those who oppose the clergy, whereas in Anglo-Saxon countries, the membership has drawn largely among white Protestants. The modern French tradition, founded in the 19th century and known as co-Freemasonry or Le Droit Humain, admits both men and women. In most lodges and in most countries, Freemasons are divided into three major degrees. You enter as an apprentice, then you become the middle degree, which is Fellow of the Craft, and then the largest degree, the hardest to obtain, is Master Mason. In many lodges, there are numerous degrees, sometimes as many as 1,000 different levels that can be superimposed in these three major divisions. In addition to the main bodies of Freemasonry derived from the British tradition, there are also a number of appendant groups that are primarily social or recreational in nature, having no official standing in Freemasonry but drawing their membership from a higher degree of society. They're especially prevalent in the United States. Among those known for their charitable work are Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of Mystic Shrine. In Britain and in certain other countries, there are separate lodges restricted to women. In addition, female relatives of Master Masons may join the Order of the Eastern Star, which is open to both women and men. Boys may join the Order of Demolay and the Order of Builders, and girls may join the Order of Job's Daughters. And girls may join the Order of Job's Daughters and the Order of Rainbow. English Masons are forbidden to affiliate with any of the recreational organizations or quasi-Masonic societies on pain of suspension from the real organization. It's actually a little sense for the overall background of Freemasonry. Let's look into some of the things that impact the United States. The origins of Freemasonry are obscure. The creation of craft occurred over time between the first recorded gentleman joining an Edinburgh Stonemasons Lodge in 1599 and the 1721 publication in London of the Constitutions of Freemasons by Scots Presbyterian minister James Anderson. Freemasonry is fundamentally a self-improvement volunteer association that teaches moral, intellectual, and spiritual lessons through three initiation ceremonies. Freemasonry's three degrees are modeled after a craftsman's progress, and we mentioned apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. Freemasonry was and remains open to men of all good reputation who profess a belief in deity. By the 1750s, a variety of Christian and non-Christians, European and non-European men, and a few women were members. Freemasonry grew popular within cities as political, commercial, and intellectual elites gathered within a lodge. So really, as you can see, Freemasonry started in one way as the Stonemasons, but really it morphed into a fraternity that really was about the elites and about the connected within cities who wanted to interact with each other and network with each other. That's essentially what it became. With aristocratic and later royal patronage, Freemasonry evolved into the preeminent fraternal organization of the 18th century. The earliest records of American Masonic lodges are in Philadelphia in 1732 and in Boston's St. John's Lodge that same year, which was duly constituted by the Grand Lodge of England and remains the oldest lodge in North America. Interwoven with the British Enlightenment, Masonic lodges formed throughout Europe and the Americas during this period. The network of Scots, English, and Irish lodge helped knit the British commercial empire together. Although American elites initially joined the Freemasons to keep pace with the genteel British behavior, the fraternity contributed to the spread of the ideas and ideals behind the American Revolution. During the Revolutionary era, Masons of note included George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, James Otis, and Paul Revere. While individual Freemasons actively participated in the American Revolution, Freemasonry as an institution, as well as its local lodges, remained politically neutral. Washington joined Freemasonry in the lodge at Fredericksburg, Virginia. He was 20 years old when he received his first degree and entered as an apprentice on November 4th, 1752. He paid the lodge £2 and 3 shillings to join. 10 days after turning 21, on March 3rd, 1753, he was passed to the second degree of Fellowcraft. On August 4th, 1753, he was raised to the third degree of Master Mason. The lodge's surviving minute records shows Washington attending only 2 more meetings, September 1st, 1753 and January 4th, 1755. Many of Washington's brothers in the Fredericksburg Lodge later served within the Continental Army or Virginia militia, including Hugh Mercer, George Whedon, and Thomas Posey. Washington's mother lodge was renamed and numbered as Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 after the creation of the Grand Lodge of Virginia in 1778. It continues to meet even today. So all these hundreds of years later, Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 is still meeting, which was Washington's original lodge. Beginning in 1778 and through the remainder of his life, Washington was a frequent participant in Masonic ceremonies. In June 24, 1779, for example, Washington attended the American Union's lodge celebration of the Feast of St. John the Baptist. The lodge comprised officers and enlisted men within the Connecticut regiments. He also visited King Solomon's Lodge in Poughkeepsie, New York on December 27, 1783. After the war in 1784, Washington accepted the invitation of his friends and neighbors to attend a June banquet at Alexandria Lodge No. 39, where he was elected as an honorary member. 4 years later, he agreed to be charter master of the lodge when it transferred its allegiance from the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania to the Grand Lodge of Virginia. In 1794, the lodge commissioned William Williams to paint Washington dressed in Masonic regalia. After Washington's death, the lodge changed its name to Alexandria Washington Lodge No. 22. So really in his honor, you can see the Alexandria Lodge put his name into their lodge name. As president, Washington exchanged letters with many Masonic local lodges and state Grand Lodges. He also met delegations of Freemasons during his visit to Rhode Island in 1790 and his 1791 tour of the southern states. His most significant Masonic activity, however, occurred on September 18, 1793. Acting as Grand Master Pro Tem, he presided at the Masonic ceremonial laying of the United States Capitol cornerstone, right in the center of Washington, D.C. So that was a huge deal and a huge ceremony there for the Masons to be part of that ceremony, to lay the first stone at the United States Capitol. At Washington's 1799 funeral, brothers of Alexandria Lodge performed Masonic rites. After Martha Washington's death, the lodge acquired many valuable items from the estate, including a Masonic apron sent from France in 1793. With these items and many curiosities, the lodge opened a museum in 1812. In 1910, the George Washington Masonic National Memorial Association was formed. Then in 1932, the association dedicated its great Masonic memorial to Washington in Alexandria, Virginia. Today, Alexandria Washington Lodge No. 22 displays many of its valuable Washington artifacts and continues to meet in the same place. The George Washington Masonic National Memorial welcomes the public 7 days a week to view its many exhibitions and enjoy the spectacular view for the top of its 330-foot tower. And if you haven't been to the Masonic Temple there in Alexandria that's dedicated to George Washington, I highly recommend you do so. It's actually a really fascinating visit. A lot of really cool artifacts there from the Masonic history of Washington and his compadres. Washington himself best articulated his membership in and relationship to Freemasonry when he replied to the Brethren of King David's Lodge in Newport, Rhode Island in 1790. He said, being persuaded that a just application of the principles on which the Masonic fraternity is founded must be promotive of private virtue and public prosperity, I shall always be happy to advance the interest of the society and be considered by them as a deserving brother. It's really interesting that that's how he felt very strongly about the Masons, their charter, their important impact in society, in advancing society and prosperity, and advancing of the Judeo-Christian principles that founded the country. So Freemasonry was very much a part of the founding of our country and our founders, many of them being part of that tradition. So let's take a look at our first video, and we'll come back and talk about it on the other side.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, July 4th, 1776. The Second Continental Congress issues the historic Declaration of Independence, a bold decree that the 13 North American colonies are now independent states and no longer ruled by Great Britain. Over the course of the next 7 bloody years, during the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, would secure the independence of the United States of America. It was a new nation, a new experiment in democratic self-rule, and a new world order.
When you go back to the founding of the United States, all of the founders were what we consider rational. Like, they were pushing for, a republican form of government. They were pushing against the monarchy, against these dogmas. This was a very revolutionary idea.
The motto of the United States, E pluribus unum, out of many one. What does that mean? That means diversity within unity. Freemasonry brings together people of diverse backgrounds, freedom from ignorance, freedom from superstition, freedom from intolerance, freedom from extremism. Those were dangerous ideas back then because absolutist monarchies and the church wanted to control you.
But along with the glory of the brave men and women who tirelessly worked and fought to establish the United States of America, there existed a curious connection to a secret society that had migrated to North America centuries earlier. The connection was apparent not only among its leaders, but also its founding documents. That secret society was the Freemasons.
Many of the founding fathers, especially the influential ones, people like George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, were Freemasons. If there is one place on the planet where the principles and the foundational teachings of Freemasonry had the greatest impact, that would be the United States of America.
There are even some people who argue that the United States, in its creation, in its inception, even in its constitutional order, was a Masonic republic.
Freemasons account for 2 of the 5 committee members who drafted the Declaration of Independence, 40% of the generals during the Revolutionary War, and 30% of those who signed their names on the U.S. Constitution.
Freemasonry and the ideals that went into the American Constitution and the Declaration of Independence have an awful lot of overlap. They had values of religious tolerance and cosmopolitanism and rights and formal equality between all citizens.
One of the Masons at the time was Montesquieu, a famous French political philosopher who had this radical idea of a separation of powers, that you should have 3 branches of government, a legislative, executive, and judicial, that they should check and balance each other to form a true republican government.
Washington, D.C., 1791. George Washington, now the first president of the United States of America, appoints French architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant to design the nation's capital. While Washington was a master mason, L'Enfant apparently never passed the level of entered apprentice. However, some believe that symbols associated with Freemasonry were embedded into the city's design as an acknowledgement of the ties between the secret society and the founding of the country.
The basic layout of the city originally had these kind of odd diagonal streets. So they had to have some reason to lay them out that way, because the normal way you would lay out a city is by a grid pattern. And DC did not follow a traditional grid pattern.
It's a very cleverly worked grid shape. So when seen from above, you have a 5-sided star. You have a cascading star, which is all part of the Masonic thought. There's no doubt that Washington, D.C. was laid out according to Masonic ideals and symbolism.
In 1793, President George Washington presided over the laying of the cornerstone for the U.S. Capitol building, a ceremony that not only initiated construction, but was also highlighted by elaborate Masonic rituals.
There appears George Washington in his Masonic regalia to perform a Masonic ceremony with grain and oil and Masonic measuring instruments and so on.
You've got the leader of the Republic, many of its key officers, in a public Masonic ceremony. And yet they're doing this as a ceremony based around their secret society.
But what was the true purpose of this new experiment in declared self-governance? An idealistic new form of democracy? Some suggest that the Freemasons who were involved actually had a hidden agenda.
People became suspicious of the fraternity. It kind of supported, I believe, the fears that Freemasonry exerted some kind of power over the government or amongst society.
Freemasonry was enormously successful in the early American Republic, but in 1826, a kind of disaster befell Freemasonry by the name of the Morgan Affair.
In 1826, William Morgan, a prominent Freemason in upstate New York, signed a publishing contract promising to reveal secrets of the Masonic initiations.
Traditionally, the Masonic oath has been quite blood-curdling. They were supposed to swear absolutely solemnly in front of all their brethren that they would never tell the secrets outside of the lodge, on pain of some quite hideous punishments, such as having their tongue torn out and their throat cut.
When Morgan announces he's going to tell all the secrets of Masonry, some of the guys in town decide to take their Masonic obligation much more seriously than they really should have. And they essentially throw him in a carriage right off into the woods, and Morgan shouts out the window, "Murder!" as they go off into the sunset, and he's never seen again.
Morgan's body was never found, but an investigation was conducted, and members of the local lodge were put on trial for his death.
There was a trial that was held of the Masons who had abducted him. The judge in the case was a Mason. The governor, he was a Mason. I believe the sheriff was a Mason. You had all these Masons involved with the prosecution of the crime, and lo and behold, nobody is convicted for the murder of William Morgan. That sets off this massive national wave of hysteria against the Masons.
This resulted in an anti-Masonic excitement that lasted from 1826 to 1842, and for that period it was very unpopular to be a Freemason.
So as you can see from that video, looking back at Masonic movement and Freemasonry in general, really had a really interesting tradition and fascinating history, starting back in England, as we mentioned, back in the 1500s, and then really their charter was approved in 1721. And then it made its way across the Atlantic to the Americas, where it became a huge part of the tradition of the founders and the influential people that founded our country. And as you saw there, it became a big part of the American Revolution, and the principles behind the American Revolution, a lot of it came from Freemasonry and the way Masons thought and believed in a just society and in freedom for the people. And so that was a huge part of that. And then as you saw, many of the founders throughout our history, not only before the revolution and during, but also after the revolution, as the Constitution was being formed, as the Bill of Rights, and as we formed our government, Freemasonry was there for all of it and was a big impetus behind it, this very important and secret fraternity of influential people. And you also saw there was a lot of controversy too around Freemasonry, and as it got into the 1800s, there was some problems with it and became less popular because some of the tactics that Freemasons were using to subdue their secrets, and some of their members coming out and saying they were going to tell their secrets, really went over the top, and the American people really did not like that. Although I will say that Freemasonry did have a resurgence in the early 1900s, about 100 years later, and even today is a big part of the elite in the United States and the educated who are part of this very secret fraternity. So very fascinating history there. You can see it's a very important part of our founding, and hopefully you enjoyed that video. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 25 interesting facts about Freemasonry.
We've all heard of Freemasonry and the supposedly hidden agenda its members have to achieve global domination through a New World Order, but how many of us really know anything substantial about the subject? I'm Mike with List 25, and from memberships to symbols, here are 25 curious facts about Freemasonry. 25. Freemasonry exists in various forms all over the world, with a membership estimated at around 5 million, including approximately 480,000 in Great Britain and over 2 million in the United States. 24. Contrary to popular belief, the Freemasons are not a secret society. A Mason can freely tell people that they are a Mason. They just can't reveal the secrets of the order. 23. The conventional establishment of Freemasonry is usually dated to 1717, when the Grand Lodge of London emerged on June 24th. The emergence of this Grand Lodge marked the beginning of Grand Lodges governing other lodges. 22. Freemasonry employs the tools and instruments of stonemasonry to teach a system of morality, friendship, and brotherly love. Hence, the standard emblem of Freemasonry is the square and compasses. 21. Masonic symbols are usually regarded as existing because of the fraternity's secrecy. However, in reality, Freemasonry started being illustrated by symbols because at the very beginning, most Freemasons couldn't read, so the symbols served to remind members of the fraternity's teachings. 20. The oldest Masonic symbol is the square and compasses. It's also the most universally recognized symbol of Freemasonry, though its exact significance varies from country to country. 19. A Masonic lodge refers to the congregation of people who meet there. It's not just the name of a building. Each lodge gets a charter from a Grand Lodge, but they basically run themselves. There's no overarching ritual for running a meeting. It varies with each individual group. 18. It's impossible to become a Freemason if you're an atheist. The first requirement is that potential members must believe in a higher power of some kind. 17. There are two known branches of Freemasonry: the regular, guided by the United Grand Lodge of England, and the liberal, represented by the Grand Orient of France. 16. Masons traditionally recognize each other by various secret signs, including wearing a ring with a Masonic emblem, various lapel badges, and sometimes the famous Freemason handshake. When shaking hands, the thumb briefly strokes the other man's hand in a certain way, though the last is mostly restricted to Freemasons in San Francisco and Washington, D.C. 15. Anders Breivik, perpetrator of the 2011 mass murders in Norway, was a practicing Freemason. 14. Freemasons are commanded not to testify truthfully when another Mason is on trial. They admit that it may be perjury, but to them, it's a far greater sin to not protect one of their own. 13. Freemasonry has no single spokesman. It's comprised of many individuals in numerous organizations, all of which are subordinate to the Grand Lodge in their area. None of these members or organizations can speak for Freemasonry. That's the responsibility of each Grand Lodge in the area. 12. In case you didn't know, there's a direct Masonic link to the Statue of Liberty. Friedrich Bartholdi, the man who designed the famous statue, was a Mason. 11. The secret handshakes and passwords now associated with Freemasonry were used by the stonemasons to identify each other, which was important for keeping secrets in the guild. 10. Astronaut Buzz Aldrin was a member of Clear Lake Lodge No. 1417 in Texas. He was also the lunar module pilot on Apollo 11, the first manned lunar landing in history. When he stepped on the moon, he had with him a special deputation from his Grand Master to claim the moon as being in the territorial jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Texas. John Glenn was also a Mason. 9. Catherine Babington wanted to know what Freemasonry was all about, so she hid inside a pulpit at meetings in Kentucky for over a year. When discovered, she was held captive for a month. 8. Some of the most famous Freemasons include Charles Darwin, Mark Twain, Winston Churchill, J. Edgar Hoover, Benjamin Franklin, and the first president and founding father of our country, George Washington. 7. Conspiracies link Freemasons to the Illuminati. However, this seems unlikely because the Illuminati are an entirely secret society to the extent that most people don't believe they exist today, while people are entirely free to divulge that they are a member of a Freemason lodge. 6. Hitler believed that the Masons were a tool of the Jews, and under the Nazi regime, it's estimated that between 80 and 200,000 Freemasons were murdered. 5. In the type of Freemasonry practiced in the United States, female members are not allowed, whereas in the type practiced in Europe, women are generally allowed to be initiated. 4. Sun worshipping is the core of Freemasonry, and probably many other secret societies. 3. In the type of Freemasonry practiced in the US, members are required to believe in God, though the interpretation of this is left up to the individual member. 2. At the time it was built in 1892, the Masonic Temple in Chicago, Illinois was the world's tallest building. It was 22 stories high. 1. During the American Civil War, enemy soldiers who recognized each other as Freemasons helped each other and saved each other's lives. Even during war, these Freemasons' loyalty to the craft did not fade.
So a lot of interesting things to talk about coming out of that video. The first one is the official date of Freemasonry beginning often is tied to 1717 in England when the Grand Lodge was established in London. However, as we talked about earlier in the program, there was meeting notes all the way back to 1599 of the first Masons meeting, first stonemasons. And so it's clear that that 1717 of the Grand Lodge establishment was just the beginning of the large rollout of Masonry to not only the European continent, but then eventually to the United States. But Masonry had been around for over 150 years at that point. So it's a little bit misleading to say 1717 is the original date of Freemasonry. Another thing I'd like to mention there, you heard the importance of symbols in Masonry, and you can see in the display behind me some of the major symbols of Freemasonry. The first one is the all-seeing eye, and you'll see in a lot of the brochures and imagery of Masonry, you'll see the all-seeing eye in a lot of different publications and articles about the movement. And what that stands for is wisdom, all-seeing wisdom that is brought by your higher power. And you'll see the all-seeing eye referred to in a number of different movies and books, even the eye in the Lord of the Rings. A lot of people think that that is referring to the Masonic all-seeing eye. You can see another one of the symbols above the Freemason sign behind me was the square and the level, which is, those were important tools for the stonemasons back in the day when they were building cathedrals. Another one of the really important symbols there. So if you find out that something is built by a mason or designed by a mason, of course, you need to really think about and look for these symbols being baked in. As you saw in the original video, we talked about Washington, D.C. was laid out by a mason and commissioned by a mason, George Washington. And so you can see the streets themselves were laid out in a way to signify some of the main symbols of Freemasonry, including the five-sided star. So really look for those when you find out. Like in the case in this video, we talked a little bit about the Statue of Liberty was designed by a Mason. And if you look very carefully at all aspects of that Statue of Liberty, you'll find several Masonic symbols built in. So that was another interesting thing there. Another thing is one of the things they took from Egyptian lore was the worship of the sun being a very important thing in Freemasonry. And they look at the sun as one of the sources of wisdom and sources of power in our universe. And of course it is. So that's also very interesting there. And then just generally, as you saw throughout the 25 interesting facts, Masonry has been laid into so many aspects of our society. Many of them we don't even think about. But if you really dig into it, you'll see Freemasons have had an impact on virtually everything we do, including our money. If you look at each of our currency bills, you'll see Masonic symbols on all of them. So very interesting clues there left by the Masons through the years for us to find. So let's go ahead. We're going to take a look at a short video of those Masonic symbols and what each of them mean.
Freemasonry, as we understand it today, is a fraternal organization that evolved from the guilds of stonemasons who built the cathedrals and castles of the Middle Ages. The symbols of this mysterious and secretive society draw heavily from the craft of masonry. They've guided Freemasons for hundreds of years, building their moral base and encouraging both personal and group development. In this video, let's take a look at some of the most important Masonic symbols and their powerful meanings. Number 1. The square and the compass. The square and the compass is notably one of Freemasonry's most emblematic symbols. Traditionally, operative Masons used the square to ensure the stones they shaped were correctly angled, emphasizing the importance of precision and wise decision-making. Freemasonry uses the square as a perpetual reminder for its members to conduct themselves with virtue. Essentially, it advises them to ensure they act with integrity and fairness. When paired with the compass, the symbol becomes more meaningful. Together they represent a blending of the material and the spiritual. The square symbolizes the earthly while the compass points towards the heavens. Often, there is a letter G at the center of this pairing. This can represent geometry, which was a science central to operative Masonry or God, the great architect of the universe. Number 2. Ashlars. Stonemasons in medieval Europe used both unrefined and polished stones in their craft. Freemasonry adopted this practice, introducing the concepts of the rough and perfect ashlars. These symbolic stones represent the journey from an undeveloped state to one of moral and intellectual enlightenment. The rough ashlar, a stone in its natural form, symbolizes the initial state of a Mason. It embodies raw potential and the coarse characteristics that require refinement through education, discipline, and diligent effort. It signifies the starting point with imperfections that the Mason must work to polish. The perfect ashlar signifies the Mason who has made considerable progress on their personal journey. This refined stone symbolizes achievement and the high standard of moral integrity that a Mason aspires to achieve through continuous self-improvement and adherence to Freemasonry's core values. It represents the phase where a Mason's actions and thoughts are in complete alignment with the ideals of Freemasonry. Number 3. Gavel. The gavel, often seen in the hands of judges or leaders to enforce order, carries a unique metaphorical meaning in Freemasonry. Here, it symbolizes the Mason's effort to refine their character, aiming to eliminate negative traits and habits to achieve moral integrity. It reflects a Mason's commitment to continual self-improvement. This symbol motivates Masons to better themselves, striving to remove their flaws and become superior individuals. It symbolizes the pursuit of personal growth and ethical living, values that are central to Freemasonry. When the Lodge's master wields the gavel, it signifies the structured discipline that is essential to Masonic events and ceremonies. It commands respect and highlights the master's responsibility in leading and making decisions that are beneficial for the group. Number 4. The all-seeing eye. The all-seeing eye, influenced by ancient Egyptians who revere the eye of Horus for its protective qualities, holds a significant place in Freemasonry. It symbolizes the concept that a higher power observes every thought and action. Often shown in a triangle or surrounded by light, it emphasizes its divine importance. For Masons, this emblem highlights the value of living with honesty and moral integrity. It serves as a reminder of the divine's constant watch, encouraging them towards righteous behavior. The all-seeing eye also signifies the Masonic pursuit of knowledge and spiritual enlightenment. Widely featured in Masonic art and symbols, the all-seeing eye merges divine oversight with the goal of intellectual and ethical growth. It's often depicted with a vivid iris and pupil placed against light or within a triangle, symbolizing deep wisdom and the presence of the divine. There are many conspiracy theories about this symbol. We've covered it in depth in a separate video. Number 5. The level. In Freemasonry, the level transcends its common application of ensuring straightness and uniformity. It symbolizes the fundamental equality of all Freemasons, irrespective of their personal backgrounds or their roles in the external world. The symbol of the level encourages for equal treatment among members, emphasizing the idea that the essence of a person's character is paramount. What distinguishes the level from other Freemasonry symbols is how it's incorporated into rituals, where it's used alongside other significant tools like the plum and square. These practices emphasize the fraternity's core values and teachings. The level's importance extends beyond equality. It encourages a life of balance and integrity, highlighting the importance of living in a manner that's both ethical and honorable. Number 6. The plum. The plum is a simple tool used by Masons to ensure that structures are built vertical and upright. Over time, it became a symbol of leading lives that are upright or honorable, aligning with their moral principles. More than just moral uprightness, this symbol also touches on spiritual dimensions. It highlights the importance of goodness and ethical actions as pathways to spiritual development. Number 7. The mosaic pavement. In Freemasonry, the mosaic pavement is a significant symbolic element that represents the floor of King Solomon's temple. It is depicted as a checkered pattern of black and white tiles and serves as an allegory for the dual nature of life and the universe. These tiles illustrate the coexistence of good and evil, light and darkness, joy and sorrow, and all the contrasting elements of existence. It reflects the human condition, urging Masons to acknowledge the world's diversities and the significance of achieving balance and harmony. The mosaic pavement also encourages Masons to reflect on their decisions, highlighting the challenges in understanding right from wrong amid life's complexities. You'll find this pattern on the floors of most Mosaic lodges. Number 8. The 47th problem of Euclid. The 47th problem of Euclid, also recognized as Pythagoras' theorem, states that in a right-angled triangle, the square of the length of the hypotenuse, the side opposite the right angle, is equal to the sum of the squares of the lengths of the other two sides. In Freemasonry, this is more than a mathematical principle. It symbolizes the Mason's appreciation for wisdom, education, and uncovering life's deeper meanings. The symbol also suggests that acquiring knowledge and gaining a deeper understanding can overcome ignorance. It can illuminate the mind, clearing away confusion and misunderstanding, much like light dispels darkness. Number 9. The hourglass. The hourglass stands as a poignant reminder of the relentless progression of time and the brief nature of human existence. It emphasizes the importance of wisely using one's time for self-improvement. It motivates Freemasons to think about eternity, showing how short life is compared to never-ending time, and gently hints at the possibility of life after death. Flipping the hourglass, which resets the sand, symbolizes a fresh start and the continuous cycle of life and death. It recognizes human limitations while also expressing the Masonic hope for existence after death. Number 10. The broken column. In Freemasonry, the broken column is a poignant symbol with deep-rooted significance. It represents the untimely death of Hiram Abiff, the legendary architect of King Solomon's temple, who passed away before his masterpiece was completed. This symbol captures ideas of human mortality, the sadness associated with incomplete tasks, and the temporary nature of life. It extends its symbolism to remind Masons of the inherent fragility of life and the urgency of fulfilling one's duties with dedication and honesty. Through its portrayal of loss and incomplete work, the broken column emphasizes the value of perseverance and integrity. It mirrors Freemasonry's teachings on navigating the uncertainties of life and the pursuit of spiritual and moral growth. Number 11. The Ark of the Covenant. A sacred chest from biblical times that held the tablets of the law given to the Israelites, the Ark of the Covenant symbolizes God's promise and guidance. In Freemasonry, it represents the pursuit of divine truth, the importance of knowledge, and living a life of honor. For Freemasons, the Ark signifies the journey towards understanding and moral integrity. It highlights the value of adhering to ethical principles and enhancing in wisdom and personal character. Additionally, the Ark illustrates the concepts of unity and brotherhood. Just as the Israelites collectively cared for and carried the Ark, Freemasons support one another in their collective quest for enlightenment and mutual commitment. This highlights the strength and solidarity within their community. Number 12, trowel. The trowel, a tool Masons traditionally use to spread mortar, plays a vital role in construction by laying the foundation and joining bricks or stones. In Freemasonry, the trowel takes on a symbolic meaning of unity and connection among its members. This tool emphasizes the importance of mutual support and understanding within the fraternity, similar to how mortar holds building materials together to create a sturdy structure. Beyond representing unity and affection among Freemasons, the trowel also symbolizes the acts of offering help quietly and engaging in charitable deeds, reflecting the organization's foundational values of benevolence and assistance. Number 13, lambskin apron. The lambskin apron originates from the protective garments worn by working Masons to shield their clothing. For Freemasons, however, it symbolizes much more than physical protection. It represents purity, innocence, and the cleanliness of the soul. Every new member of Freemasonry is presented with a lambskin apron. It's regarded as the most traditional and esteemed attire a Mason can put on, signifying their dedication to the principles and commitments of Freemasonry. The appearance of the apron has evolved over time, incorporating new designs and emblems indicative of a Mason's rank and accomplishments. However, the fundamental meaning of the lambskin apron, symbolizing a Freemason's virtuous intentions and spirit, remains unchanged. So, there you have it. While there are many more Freemason symbols, these are among the most important, conveying the essence of Freemasonry.
So you can see there from that video all the different symbols that come out of Freemasonry, and they only went through 13, but there are many, many more. They all have a very important aspect of Freemasonry they're trying to convey to their members and to the external world. And all of them have their own importance in the overall enlightenment of this movement, of this fraternity. So just a couple that I noted down here. First one is the square and the compass. Of course, it represents integrity and honor. The all-seeing eye represents divine knowledge and enlightenment. The gavel, of course, structure and organization. The ashlar, which is the unfinished rock or rough rock, it represents refinement and the ability to take that rough rock and make it a smooth rock. So it's the refinement of the individual or the refinement of the soul. The level, which gives you uniformity and equality and balance. The plumb, which gives you leading upright lives or leading moral lives, and also leading ethical lives. The mosaic pavement, which I thought was very interesting that they have that in all the different lodges around the world. That was the floor, they believe, of what it looked like in the King Solomon's Temple, which of course was built pre-BC. One of the most famous buildings ever built. Unfortunately, we don't have any semblance of that building left anymore, but from the biblical descriptions of it, we do know about the mosaic pavement floor. And this was the time when stonemasons, during the building of the Solomon Temple, became very prominent, and it became one of the most important professions in the world, being a stonemason. And so, although that was well before BC and well before the Masons became a movement or a fraternity, really was the beginning of the prominence of the profession of being a stone worker, essentially. And so it's interesting that we've carried forward the mosaic floor as one of the important symbols of Freemasons. And of course, that pavement floor, it stands for good and evil, you know, the black being evil, the white being good. It stands for the individual having to always choose between good and evil throughout their lives and trying to choose the right path, the moral path and the bad path, and to try to go the right way at all times. So it really is a big symbol of good and evil, and it reminds us that we always need to be looking for that good path. The hourglass, of course, is relentless progression of time and eternity, and it also gives you that feeling of always having to think about your time on earth being limited. And also, it also gives you the concept of post-life, what that's going to be like, whether it's heaven in the religion you believe in or something else. But what does that look like after life? And then the last one I want to mention was the Ark of the Covenant, which of course is one of the most important artifacts from our biblical traditions, and is something that men have been looking for many, many centuries, have not located yet, but of course house the 10 Commandments that Moses was given by God. Of course, represents a whole number of things in Freemasonry. One of them being God's promise and guidance, and also it provides God's divine teachings. So, and gives what is essentially divine truth to mankind. So those are some of the notes I took from the symbols video. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned a lot about Freemasonry today, and that you want to dig a little bit more into it and find out more about this very interesting movement. In some ways, very secret movement, but we have been able to obtain some things about it. As you can see, Freemasonry and the Masonic movement itself is very much interwoven into everything about America, about our foundings, about our founding fathers. And even today, many of the symbols around Freemasons and the Masonic movement are part of everything that we do, and really gives us some thought about what their principles were all about morality, about living life the right way, living life in a moral way with a compass, going towards the good versus the bad, having a society that is built on the important foundations of your higher power, and doing things in an honorable and integral way. So those are the teachings from Freemasonry, and hopefully you learned a lot about that and you'll want to learn some more. So thank you very much for joining this evening. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more great content coming your way, and hopefully you enjoy history as much as we do. Have a good evening.